Morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. That you're going to have a beautiful Sunday, start to the week. Today, I'm going to talk about this idea of a higher power, and this is brought up a lot in recovery. And my understanding that I'm going to express now for all of you is that I'm going to equate it to a neurological base, which is that we have our ego, which is usually forged from survival. And this ego has things now embedded within it that are based from survival. So, like and dislike are akin to I didn't die, I almost did. Discomfort versus comfort. So when we look at that as sort of the foundational blocks of an ego that's based or personality based in fear and survival, that brings up the question, who are we without our fears? Is a big part of my personality how I handle stress? What if that was eradicated through a regulated nervous system? Who would I be without my default settings of fear? So this is a very opportune moment, an invitation to integrate something that is currently seen or deemed as outside of oneself. Ironically, this is not something that is outside of us. This is something that we currently am blocking and are our own impediment to experiencing, but it has never left us. It is simply waiting for us to include. But because of free will, because of emotional dysregulation, because of the intensity that is the gift of fight or flight, doing its job, the ego protecting, surviving, when we are only focused and fixated on survival, we're not able to remember that there are other ways to go about things when survival is not the most impertinent goal. So, and just a quick aside, the survival fear-based sort of whatever, it gets a lot of bad rep, specifically in the community that is more spiritual, and it really doesn't need to be judged. It is a beautiful mechanism and design that is created to keep us alive here. Now, what gets nasty or can be imprisoning are the loops of thought and the fixation that the mind is building up and blowing out of proportion and becoming addicted to, the even physiological, biochemical effects of fear, such as cortisol and the stress hormone and adrenaline and stuff. But it's not a inherently bad thing. So when we're in a recovery sort of context and people are saying, think of a power higher than yourself, or greater than yourself, to harness and to alleviate and to propel and to power you. I like to correlate this to think of different pathways to approaching a situation that you yourself thus far have not thought of. Because this is the edge of where we stop personality wise. It's that sort of no man's land, neuroplasticity, sort of dark matter, subconscious like terrain, where it's all unrehearsed. It's all not adventured yet. It's yet to be explored. And that is, I think, for me, a way to understand when something like a power greater than yourself is offered, because that is a power or a palette or a canvas that is greater than, bigger in scale, perspective. The unknown is bigger than myself. That is the offer to incorporate the unknown is a power greater than myself, and fear being a vehicle for inspiration to actually step outside of that border of where I stop. And that border that was forged from fear versus love is going to take and require an intensity for me to be able to jump over it into something that is bigger than myself, which is source energy, which is creator, which is coming from not only survival, which is a source greater than myself, a power greater than myself. So I love to correlate this because I think it's saying the same thing with different language. Is this power that's greater, that's outside of myself, is how one can approach a situation that is not based from survival mode. It is, how does this personality that I've concocted and has gotten me this far in life thus far, how could I now apply a different way that's outside of myself and integrate that within me, so what was once outside and not available is now a part of, and therefore I am greater than because I'm channeling and becoming a conduit and a vessel for. So this hopefully can demystify sort of this idea in recovery. And recovery is such a broad term, and a very few people are in a healing journey. It doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be drugs. It can be recovery from being human, from constantly being in fight or flight, from anxiety disorder, from depression, from grief. There is such this huge part of the world that is in this process of recovering. And recovery versus recovering are also different sorts of mentality and messages that we're sending to ourselves subconsciously too. So I am in recovery from what? Being human, from hurting myself, from being addicted to fear-based thought loops that gave me cortisol and stress and, stimulated me because I thought that stimulation was my baseline and whatever. So the details aren't as important, but what is once we are here and admit and surrender and accept that we need to apply a power outside of us that is greater than us to tackle this. This is what I offer earlier, which is where we stop our personality, our likes and our dislikes, where we feel initially fear, that moment is an offer of courage. Not fear into cowardice, but fear into courage, which is expanse. When the system is regulated enough and the heart is open, then we're able to integrate what is initially perceived outside of us as a part of who we can be. And that is a power that is greater than ourselves. So I love this correlation of vocabulary and the importance of not deviating from truth and knowledge. Just being able to shift the words so that they may activate others in specific capacity that maybe one genre or more one context cannot. But I would highly suggest this sort of work, recovery work, cognitive behavioral therapy, good morning, sweetheart, any of it to anyone, because I would say 95% of the population is addicted to something, and a very, very small percentage of us look to recover, look to integrate shadow, are curious about a new baseline, are desiring to integrate a power greater than themselves, which is a power, an identity, ways to approach situation in different avenues that are currently seen as greater than us, but once integrated have always been waiting to be a part of us. This kind of work. So, and I also want to correlate a power greater than ourselves is simply something not as demystifying this as to something as simple as community. A power greater than us singularly is a collective consciousness as well. So If there are people that are struggling with this idea, this concept, I encourage you to apply maybe different ways of getting there, of simply not stopping at our likes and dislikes at personality wise and how we attempt to solve or to conduct or to figure out the world, to not be prohibited by the edge of our ego, of our internal discourse, and to release and to, with when this is really truly only available through a regulated nervous system, to understand that there are different ways to go up a mountain, if that makes sense. And perhaps our way worked once, it doesn't mean it's the only way, and it must work that way every time for it to be a success, or B, good enough, or C, the only way to keep from danger. So when we are currently constantly collapsing our own personal wave of potential into a very specific avenue, a particle, we are limiting not only how we experience ourselves, but how we experience the world and how the world experiences us. So it's this self-fulfilling prophecy that is fated because we are actually unaware of how we are writing a script for ourselves to fulfill from a dysregulated nervous system that is at such intensity that it is the star of the show and nothing else can even be on stage, let alone appreciated, in detail, something like even the seats or, the stage itself or the lights, the context of which whatever's happening on, that's not even looked at or focused, which is just as important as the event, because without the context, the event cannot happen. And when one understands and starts to realize that we are the event and also the context, we are the observer and the observed, we are the dreamer and the dream, then we have choice all of a sudden, and get to offer things to ourselves like, that did work once for me, once long ago, but how do I approach this now knowing that I'm safe? Or from neutrality. Because I want to say quickly as well, this idea that being safe all the time means that you must be safe from something. So there's still this undercurrent of needing to be protected. And when that is released and there is just the isness of being in the now, that is the neutrality, the observation, the Mary Magdalene of all potential, of the Christ consciousness that every potential is valid and part of the expanse and experience. So it again releases judgment before it happens in a physical way. It already exists as an energetic way. And our repetition, because of fear, is forcing our experience in life and the divine to only be interpreted and accepted in a very specific way that is induced and needing cortisol and stress and adrenaline in order for it to even be perceived and received as something that is of value or correct or right or enough. So again, this power outside of ourselves that seems to be greater is simply just different ways to attack or to approach whatever it is we're summiting or exploring. That is the power that is greater than ourselves. That is something like collective consciousness or community that can help us in solidarity through these experiences, or that is application of the way that someone else has done something and we deem it a success, to integrate that. That is a power greater than ourselves because it is something outside of where we stop. And where we stop is generally forged from fear, and that fear is survival. So our likes and dislikes are not necessarily personality as they are compulsion and projection of threat. A very old program that is beautifully disguised and decorated as choice can really be from compulsion and fear. And I'm not saying that's always the case, but it is great to look at that and see, is where I'm stopping from an active choice right now. Is that why my boundaries are the way they are? Or are my boundaries from fear still? Is the threat that was there 15 years ago gone, but I'm still in a place of boundary preparing for that threat? Or are my boundaries now intrinsically a part of the principles that I'm embodying and therefore naturally eradicate things that do not harmonize with what I am channeling, such as love, honesty, integrity, integration, hope, neutrality, openness, observation, potential, acceptance, authenticity? What are the borders? What are the boundaries that are naturally in effect because of focusing on those attributes? What comes from that? And then from that fixation and that focus and that worshiping and that devotion to those attributes, or the Christ consciousness and Mary Magdalene frequencies, whatever we want to focus on, what are we channeling? And then how is that naturally from that involvement does that create our personality, and then where we stop, let's say. So this isn't a bad or good or right or wrong. It's simply an option, a choice of how we want to continue experiencing. So this power greater than ourselves, for me, let's say I functioned from the fear of feelings, of death all the time, let's just say. So as a result, my personality was such. And at one point I got tired. It wasn't working for me any longer. So I now reached out to a power greater than myself, which is where Paul stops, Paul being forged from fear. So a power greater than that is something outside of just fear, right? More choice. So that is me incorporating something like, let's say, Mary Magdalene, Christ consciousness, violet flame, frequency, energy, thinking about that my whole day as my focal point. And then as a result, Paul releases his fear, and these frequencies are now in place, and I make choice through them. And therefore, a power that was outside of me or greater than myself has now become integrated within me. And I am now changed. I am now experiencing the world differently. I am now moving differently, with different authority, with a calmness, not just reactive, not just being ping-ponged back and forth from bullshit like in this, like, oh my God, constantly reactive decisions, but responsive ones from the heart, from choice, from sovereignty. So this is this option, this offer, this idea in recovery, a power greater than yourself, are principles. And maybe we don't even know what those principles are because we have been manipulating our whole life from survival, probably, from fear, generally, that we get to give ourselves an education and actually ask, what are our principles? What is love? What is honesty? What is meaning what I say? This can be for anyone. It doesn't have to be someone that is in recovery. But a lot of us need to be in recovery from something. So this is a much more invitational sort of experience and option and offer to include a power greater than ourselves for anyone. And when that's truly applied without self-judgment but more curiosity, then there isn't a shield of defense and protectiveness and reaffirming while doing. There is an openness. There is a desire to expand, a want, an understanding that there is something outside of this that once integrated can shift for forever how experience is felt. And that's trust and that's faith, and then that can be the seed that goes into knowing. So, all of this to say that we are far more powerful than we maybe give ourselves credit for. All of these energies and how we apply them are waiting for us to include. And once we do, we are forever different as a result. We are forever different when we include the idea of Christ consciousness when we move about in our day. Then me, little Paul, that is survival, he calms down and something else is turned up within me, and together we move in the world with a calmness and a responsibility, the ability to respond and to attack and look at and comprehend situation from different pathways, which are the neuroplasticity in the brain that lead to the subconscious. That is, the developmental bridges are now open. They're now incorporating new energy and aspect to build with, as opposed to the prominent one, which is survival, which is fight or flight, which is an unregulated nervous system. So these are all the same kind of stacked offers that are happening gorgeously and deliciously, and it eradicates victim mentality. And it empowers the individual to look at how they've gotten thus far in life. Do they want to continue in that limited way, or are they able to release it and then include more? And whilst doing that, understanding that where they are going past their limit of like and dislike or fear or good or bad or everything that makes the personality, if it was just forged from survival, then we're able to actually grow and expand and experience the world differently, because we're no longer utilizing one way in which to interpret it, and one way in which to summit it, and one way in which to interact with it. And it is incredible how that one way for the majority of the 3D, that one way that we integrate and interpret and relate to the world through is survival. And this is inherently not bad. Survival is good. We need to. But when the threat has been neutralized, but we still stay in panic mode, then we are going to take everything in this way of fight or flight, completely not even knowing, let alone believing we have the time or the ability or the privilege or the worth to incorporate something like the Sophia energy, the Christ consciousness, the violet flame, the angels in heaven, the frequencies of love, of peace, of understanding, of calmness, of continuity, of authenticity. We don't even think that's on the table, when in fact it's part of the buffet that's there and the feast. But we're fixated on the crumb of survival, that we think that's all we are worth. So I just wanted to share that today. The moment we're aware of more choice and then integrate that choice is the moment that we have applied a power greater than ourselves. It is the moment that we are in the edge of our own personal discourse of where my ego stops and where something else still is. It's to play in the subconsciousness. It's the neuroplasticity that's in all of us. It is the dark matter that's in the universe, just at the macro level, the stars being synapses that have already been connected and illuminated, right? So this is the excitingness. This is the point. This is the pregnancy. This is the potential to be on the edge of where we like and dislike, and then incorporate something like truth, or incorporate something like acceptance or authenticity, and see how that inspiration as a compass and reinforms how we conduct ourselves through that day or through that moment, or how we even experience ourselves, let alone others. And it's going to completely shift reality, because you're not functioning from the identity that has brought you to that point prior without integration of these ideas. So, all right, I hope you're doing all well, of course. Wishing you a great day, and yeah, sending you love. Shatsi, what do you think? Ciao.